permission. In this world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life.
The movie opens on something almost normal. For once, Lois's daughter Merritt is auditioning for a reality show role, and as Merritt runs through her lines, Lois can't help but pick apart her posture and her delivery, which doesn't go over well, since Merritt is clearly not looking for criticism, she's looking for support, and this small moment actually says a lot about their whole relationship. Lois has spent so long dealing in crime scenes and control that she doesn't know how to just be encouraging anymore, even with her own daughter, and as usual, Lois is drinking through the entire exchange, which makes her feedback land even worse than it already would have. Since Merritt can see exactly what's fueling her mother's mood later, as a way to bond, Lois decides to make her daughter a massive turducken, something like 12,000 calories worth of food, and in exchange for helping Merritt work toward her own weight goals, Lois strikes a deal. She gets to drink however much she wants without her daughter complaining about it. On the surface, this looks like a sweet mother-daughter moment, but if you actually break down what's happening, it's really two people trading away concern for each other. Merritt gets to avoid being lectured about her body, and Lois gets to avoid being lectured about her drinking. Neither of them is actually being helped here. They're just agreeing to stop helping each other. Over dinner, as the two of them finally relax a little, Lois opens up about how she first met Marshall, back when she was working as a waitress, and he'd stay behind after his classes just to talk to her. It's a rare soft moment in the show, but it also quietly reminds you how much she's lost since then. The version of Lois telling that story is warm and hopeful, which makes the version of her we've been watching this whole season, drowning in guilt and vodka, hit even harder by comparison. Meanwhile, the investigation is still very much alive. Sister Megan lays out where they currently stand. She's convinced the killer has to be a surgeon, or at least someone with real knowledge of human anatomy, which is a meaningful theory because every crime scene so far has involved a level of precision that a random attacker just wouldn't have. While Lois has her own theory forming too, she's becoming more and more convinced that all of this, somehow, is being aimed at her personally, not just her town, her specifically, which is a paranoid-sounding claim on the surface, but the show keeps dropping small details that make it hard to fully dismiss. And then Lois gets called out to another crime scene.
Don't shoot to kill if you can help it.
Let's go, move in, move in! Go.
Pediatric unit now.
Around this same time, Sister Megan is working on a new article about the murders, and she calls Father Charlie to run it by him, since she needs his approval before publishing anything this controversial. But Father Charlie is more focused on his own image these days, and as we spend more time with him, it becomes clear he's leading a kind of double life, presenting himself as pious and composed to his congregation, while chasing something more image-obsessed behind closed doors.
This is exactly what they're talking about right now, and this is regarding and lifestyle too. The church is dying.
Sinners.
Later, Lois goes to visit Marshall at the hospital, and while she's there, Nurse Red is treating what looks like a concerning infection. And as Red tends to him, she calls Lois out directly for her drinking, which hits hard enough that Lois actually breaks down crying right there. It's one of the only moments in the show where Lois actually lets her guard down instead of deflecting with a joke or a drink. The two of them end up talking further, and that's when Red tells Lois she wants to be given power of attorney over Marshall, arguing flat out that she she cares about him more than Lois does. Lois refuses to sign anything and leaves, but the fact that Red would even ask says a lot about how far she's inserted herself into Marshall's life while he's been unconscious. This isn't just a devoted nurse anymore. This is someone who has started to see herself as Marshall's real family instead of Lois. Afterward, sitting outside the hospital, Lois meets an orderly named Eddie, and as they talk, there's an easy, flirtatious energy between them, the kind of connection Lois clearly hasn't felt in a long time, which matters because up until now, every relationship we've seen her in has been strained. Her marriage, her daughter, her partnership with Megan. So Eddie represents the first version of ease she's had all season. She keeps drinking from her flask the entire time they talk, and as she gets up to leave, Eddie warns her she shouldn't be driving. She leaves anyway, and moments later, swerving on the road, she crashes her car into a pole, and depending on how you read what comes next, what happens after this crash may not be entirely real. The show deliberately blurs that line rather than confirming it outright. Not long after, Lois is back at the hospital. Same night, she escapes with Eddie before treatment. Days later, she visits Marshall at his bedside. Talking to him directly, even though he can't respond, she admits to him that the only thing holding her together right now is a mix of pills and alcohol, and that she's genuinely afraid she might not survive this investigation, which is a heavier admission than anything she's said out loud to another living person this whole season. She can only say it to someone who can't respond. What she doesn't know is that Nurse Red is secretly recording every word of it, and as Red listens back, she interprets Lois's fear and exhaustion as a sign that Lois is already checking out, giving Red even more reason to push for control over Marshall's care, which turns a private, vulnerable moment into ammunition that gets used against her later. Meanwhile, at the church, Father Charlie's double life becomes even more obvious. As it turns out, he's been producing his own fitness videos, a strange contrast to the pious image he presents to his congregation. When Megan brings him her finished article, instead of being impressed, he criticizes it for not being graphic enough, which tells you exactly what kind of attention he thinks this story deserves. He's not reacting like a priest concerned about victims. He's reacting like someone who wants the horror amplified, and that alone should make you uneasy about him. Back home, Lois finally gets a break in the investigation, as Merritt has actually solved the puzzle box recovered all the way back from one of the earliest crime scenes. Inside it, there's a small rolled-up note with a set of coordinates written on it, and Lois immediately calls Sister Megan, telling her they finally have another real lead to chase. And after weeks of dead ends, this is the first concrete thing the killer has actually handed them, willingly, which raises its own question. Why would Grotesquerie want them to find this at all? The two of them set out together toward the location, and along the way there's a genuinely unexpected moment between them, as Megan opens up about a part of her past nobody would expect, revealing she was once a serious, promising opera singer before she ever became a nun. They end up singing together in the car, and for a few minutes, this feels like the closest thing to a lighthearted scene the show has given these two characters, which matters because it's the moment their partnership stops feeling professional and starts feeling like an actual friendship. Right before the show is about to test that friendship in the worst possible way, but that mood doesn't last because as they reach the coordinates, what they find is a massive fire pit burning in the middle of the desert. A strange man named Dr. Joseph Ritter meets them there, and he explains that the area sits on a fault line prone to earthquakes, which is what's allowed natural gas deposits underground to catch fire and burn through the surface like this. He tells them, somewhat ominously, that he's there specifically to keep people like them away from the site, and whether that's simple public safety or something more deliberate is left completely open, which is exactly the kind of ambiguity this show keeps leaning on. Shaken by what they've seen, Lois and Megan decide to head back toward the nearest town to find a hotel for the night. On the way, they stop for gas, and as Lois steps out of the car, she notices a strange man off in the distance, digging along the edge of the fire line for reasons that are never explained, and that unsettling image that lingers as the wildfires from the fire pit start spreading and forcing everyone in the area to evacuate. While driving away from the smoke, Lois and Sister Megan come across a young woman on the side of the road, covered head to toe in blood. She gives her name as Andrea and claims what happened to her was just an accident, though Lois isn't convinced that's the full story, and that instinct alone tells you Lois's detective brain never fully turns off, even mid-crisis. As the smoke gets worse, Andrea tells them she knows somewhere safe nearby, a motel where a friend of hers named Nick works, and leads them there to ride out the fires. Once they arrive, both Lois and Sister Megan start to suspect something is seriously wrong beyond just the fire outside. Megan Megan raises the idea that they may have actually inhaled some kind of hallucinogen from the smoke itself, and Lois isn't quick to dismiss it either, especially once they notice the motel's swimming pool is an unnatural shade of purple, which is the show's way of quietly telling you not to trust anything you're about to see at full face value. At the front desk, they meet another young woman working there, who has a visible bruise on her face. Lois, being who she is, tries to step in and offer help, but the woman firmly shuts her down and wants nothing to do with it, which mirrors something important. Lois keeps trying to save people who don't want saving, and that pattern is going to matter again before this episode is over. And as the two of them settle in, expecting a quiet night waiting out the fire, that expectation completely falls apart. Outside, a car crash happens right in front of the motel, and as Sister Megan rushes out to help, she witnesses something horrifying involving Nick and the front desk woman, something that makes it clear he's far more dangerous than anyone realized. And this is the moment the motel stops being a shelter from the danger outside and starts being a danger of its own. Moments later, gunshots ring out, and Lois grabs a weapon of her own. Convinced that Grotesquerie has finally come to find them directly, they run outside to find Nick holding a gun on Andrea. And just as that standoff reaches its breaking point, a truck pulls up out of nowhere, a masked man gets out, and in the chaos that follows, Lois opens fire trying to stop him, but he still manages to grab Andrea and pull her away, despite Lois, Megan, and even Nick all trying to stop him, which raises a real question. If Nick was actually working with or for Grotesquerie, why would this masked man be fighting him too? Unless there's more than one player involved in all of this than anyone's accounted for yet. And in the middle of that chaos, Sister Megan is shot. She collapses right there, and the episode shifts hard into a different tone as Lois rushes her to the hospital, staying by her side the entire time after everything Megan has survived up to this point. Watching her actually go down changes the stakes of everything. This is no longer just about catching a killer. It's personal now in a way it wasn't before. When Father Charlie arrives at the hospital, he's furious, and instead of comforting Lois, he directly accuses her of using Sister Megan as bait, which forces you to ask whether he's speaking out of genuine concern for Megan or whether his reaction is a little too aggressive for someone who's supposedly just a concerned friend. And that's where things stand right now, with Sister Megan alive but badly hurt, Father Charlie's own trustworthiness now in serious question, and a growing suspicion hanging over the investigation, including, disturbingly, over Lois herself. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more recaps just like this one.